Salutations. My name is Joel Wilborn, and this is OXYWORD. In this episode, we have a gentleman who is on a mission, and he's proving that incarcerated people are more than just locked up folks who sit around watching TV and eating food all day long. Sometimes they have a mission, and sometimes they have the determination to complete that mission. And he is looking for assistance to help improve the current situation within the state of Washington. So I ask you to sit back and take note of OXYWORD. Okay, on the line, we have a person who is currently incarcerated at the Airway Heights Correction Center. Could you state your name?
My name is James Edward Curtis.
Okay, and I understand you're currently working on a project within the prison. Would you like to explain that to us?
Sure. It's my main objective is to bring body cameras to force DOC to promulgate a policy to implement body cameras within the prison system so that custody staff have to wear body cameras that record visually and audio of all their interactions with prisoners within the prison system.
Now I know...
The reason that I'm...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, excuse me.
No, I was just going to ask another question. Go ahead and continue.
My main reason for wanting to get a campaign going, whether it's through the legislature and or the courts to force DOC to implement a body camera policy is, number one, it protects staff and prisoners alike. But more personally, I've been subjected to a long-standing campaign of calculated harassment by the Department of Washington State Department of Corrections, and all of my complaints have gone unsubstantiated or disregarded because it's my word against staff. Most of the campaign is being carried out in blind spots within the prison, mostly my cell. And so it's a foolproof system of harassment that they have, and the only check on it is to record the staff's conduct when they enter the cell, i.e. the blind spot. And so that got me started after years of being persecuted and harassed in response to my constitutionally protected conduct, my letter writing, essays, exposés, and activism within the prison to try to alter policies or hold corrupt staff accountable for their actions. The intelligence services has implemented a campaign of harassment against me. And so I've set out to use the Washington State's Public Records Act to collect serious staff misconduct, record evidence of that, whether it be guards introducing drugs into the prisons or thefts by guards or any other serious misconduct where the guards abuse or violate the law, custodial sexual assault on prisoners or whatnot. I've set out to collect documentary evidence of this staff misconduct in hopes of using it in the offing in a lawsuit or political campaign to bring these body cameras into the prisons.
Now, I know the prison has video cameras mounted around there. Now, what would you say would be the purpose of having body cams as opposed to maybe increasing the video cameras that's around the prison?
Well, there's two problems with the surveillance system, i.e. the cameras that the Department of Corrections currently have in place. They have what's called stationary cameras pointed in various directions and in the day rooms and whatnot. And when they respond to an emergency situation, they can bring camcorders, handheld camcorders. Well, the courts in Washington State have said that any video captured by stationary cameras within the prisons are not subject to public disclosure. So all the video footage that's being recorded within the prison is held by and beyond the reach of the public. We can't even get it through the Public Records Act. And there are several cases that have demonstrated that, and the courts have called it intelligence information. Now, the problem with the handheld cameras is that the staff control those, and they record what they want to record. And if they record what they don't want the public to see, then the recording disappears. I've encountered that in my own situations where I've watched staff record me, and when I've requested it via the Public Records Act, the recording disappears. They couldn't find it. There was none. But so the benefits of body cameras, as we know in the larger community, is that cell phones are prolific, and they've captured, the shootings and deaths by police of unarmed, innocent civilians in our communities. George Floyd being one that is fresh on everybody's minds, but there's been many. But had those cell phones not been available, it would have been the police officer's word against any bystanders or witnesses that were left alive in these interactions with the police and the use of deadly force. So the same benefits accrue to prisoners within these closed environments, and that is if the guards are forced to wear body cameras, then and per policy there's a retention policy and schedule, and these video footage is subject to disclosure, then prisoners and prisoners' loved ones in the community and all stakeholders that have an interest in the correctional system functioning in a legitimate and proper manner will benefit from, they'll have access to it. Any guards, correctional officers, that they'll benefit from it too. If they're accused of false allegations, sexual harassment, or anything of that nature, if they have body cameras on that's recording audio and visual, then they can protect themselves from false allegations. So it's just a positive and very beneficial thing that both the community, prisoners, and staff alike can benefit from.
All right. Now, I know when people are being watched, their tendencies leads toward proper action. Now, you're saying that this could benefit both the guards and the incarcerated people. How would the incarcerated people feel knowing that they're under constant surveillance? out there. I know if mistreatment was occurring, that would definitely be a benefit to them. But how do they feel on their everyday activities?
Well, it's I don't think they would feel any different. I think they would feel protected, where because we're under constant surveillance anyway. There's numerous cameras. I'm sitting in the day room on a telephone, and I'm being recorded right now. Both this call's being recorded and can be either live monitored or intelligence services and people authorized to go in and listen to my phone calls or other prisoners' phone calls can go in at a later date and listen to it. Now, there's cameras pointed at me. I know that I'm being recorded, and we see it every day. If there's a fight in the day room, the video footage is pulled, and it's used against the prisoners at their disciplinary hearings or some other incident. It's used to prosecute inmates. The problem is not so much, in my view, that it's going to somehow negatively affect prisoners' psychology, because we've already under surveillance. Now, the body cameras, if forced to be worn by staff, they're not going to be able to go in and watch you shower. They're not going to be able to watch you use the restroom. And it's not going to record those things with staff. It's not going to record them using the restroom. It's going to record and capture the interactions between the human beings that wear uniforms and badges and those that don't, i.e. the powerful and the powerless. And it's going to capture all that, and it's going to be available to the public in almost any situation where a dispute arises.
Now, I notice on police body cams, there are times that they'll record something without audio, or they'll just turn it off. Now, I'm sure these guards are going to want their own privacy as well. So what have you looked at in terms of when these are supposed to be active and the full extent of their activation?
Okay, ask the last part again, because I had trouble hearing you.
Okay, these, when will they be able to turn off the sound, turn off the camera? You know, what kind of rules are you setting forth for them to have these cameras on during their shift?
Well, it's my hope and my goal is that they're live monitoring, live recording from the time the officer steps into the unit, from the time that he leaves. Now, if with technology today, that's not going to pose a problem. Now, any individual officer may be able to turn the audio off or even the visual recordings off, but if there's policies in place that prohibit that, then if there's a dispute arises and the video disappears or the audio was somehow turned off, then the correctional officer that's wearing it has some explaining to do. And there's, you know, we can't really evaluate that out of context. We have to look at the situation that's happened and how it is that it actually got turned off and evaluate it and to see if it's a pretext or the officer legitimately accidentally turned it off. But those are things that have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But in general, any policy should require constant recording, audio and visual, in my opinion.
Now, right now, it looks as if the complete control of the body cams is under the discretion of the guard. What if an incarcerated person is in an uncomfortable situation and wants to make sure that the body cam is on? Do they have some kind of, are you looking toward giving them some kind of option to request that the body cam be turned on during a confrontation or something?
Well, as it is right now, there's no policy allowing for prisoners to request that. And the way that life works on the ground in every prison that I've ever been to is that the prisoner in any given situation may make a request, but we're pretty much powerless and dependent upon whatever supervisors present and what they believe is appropriate. Now, when you have a prisoner, as has happened to me in my experience, is where I filed a grievance for some serious staff misconduct, and I'm called into a little room where the sergeant brings another correctional officer to stand by for what I perceive to be intimidation purposes, as well as a witness for him. And I request body camera or that this interview be recorded. I'm going to get an absolutely no. It's not happening. We don't have to do it. We're not going to do it. And that's it. And in those type of conversations, interviews, they get carried away. The staff speak to you crazy. They provoke you. And if you're not well-centered and well-grounded, you're subject to put yourself in a situation where you get beat up or charged with assault. And I can tell you just recently an incident occurred here at Airway Heights where an inmate allegedly swung on an officer. He's standing on the tier. He swung on an officer. I didn't see it allegedly. Some people say he hit the officer, but he immediately retreated into his cell and closed the door. So at that point, the emergency situation is over. The guard is on the outside of the cell. The inmate's closed in the cell where he can be locked in there and can't get out. He's by himself. Well, the cell is not recorded. There's no camera in there. It's a blind spot within the prison. Prior to staff responding and recording with a camcorder the incident, staff went in the cell without any recording.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
And cuffed the inmate. That's that. When one other inmate went to the hole over it because he asked staff, "Why are you in there beating on him?" And I'm going to Olympia over this. I'm going to the media, and he was told to cuff up and taken to solitary confinement for those comments. And
you have 30 seconds remaining.
So body cameras would have protected everybody in that incident. I don't know what occurred inside the cell, but I know that the cell was a blind spot, and body cameras would have protected the inmate and the staff from any kind of allegations that they used excessive force. And this is going to hang up. Should I call back?
Yes, you can call back.
I don't know where we missed. We got cut off. But what I was saying was about that recent incident is that body cameras will protect the inmate and the staff that went in the cell. Protect the inmate from being subjected to potentially protect them from being subjected to excessive use of force in a heated situation in which the responding staff believe that the inmate just punched a correctional officer. And so they're coming in hot and heavy and not always making the best choices in those situations. So, but it also protects the staff from false allegations that the inmate was subjected to use of force. But that being said, and I don't know what happened in the cell. I just know what I observed and what I've heard. But I do know that body cameras, if there was a policy where staff had to wear them, everybody would potentially be protected in that situation that I cited as an example. That being said, I would like to move, if you don't mind, to the lawsuit that I have, which arose from my trying to obtain record documentation of serious staff misconduct, i.e., records documenting the introduction of drugs into the Washington State Penitentiary by a correctional officer, and document a little bit about that and talk and spread some information on that.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, so in the course of my gathering evidence of serious staff misconduct to support the body camera policy that I want DOC to implement, I've been using the Public Records Act, Washington State's Public Records Act, to request documentary evidence, records of serious staff misconduct that I learned about. So, before I skip ahead too far, I would like to just touch upon briefly what Washington State's Public Records Act is and what it's designed to do. In 1972, the Coalition for Open Government, various organizations and citizens within the Washington State, got it passed into law. And the coalition was concerned about the activities of the state and local agencies, and they just wanted to be able to keep an eye on the government, essentially. And I'd like to quote briefly from the Public Records Act that's within the statute itself, and I quote, "The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies that serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may maintain control over the instruments that they have created." End of quote. This is embodied in the Washington State's Public Records Act, which I might add is one of the most strongest Public Records Act in the United States of America. Now, in 1994, Washington State Supreme Court stated the following, quote, "The stated purpose of the Public Records Act is nothing less than the preservation of the most central tenets of representative government, namely the sovereignty of the people and the accountability to the people of public officials and institutions. Without tools such as the Public Records Act, government of the people, by the people, for the people, risks becoming government of the people by the bureaucrats for the special interest." That's what our Supreme Court had to say about the Public Records Act. Now, when it was first enacted, the Public Records Act was sometimes referred to as a sunshine law, and this was in reference to Justice Brandeis, who said, quote, "Sunshine is said to be the best disinfectant," end of quote. It's According to some people, the Public Records Act I'm speaking of, it's the cornerstone of democracy. Or the cornerstone of democracy is government accountability, and the Public Records Act serves that. So it exists to promote democracy and open government for all the people. Our former Washington State's former Attorney General, Rob McKenna, had this to say about it in 2006. To be effective, a law must be applied correctly, consistently, and fairly. When it comes to the Public Records Act, this means that agencies must approach a records request by focusing on how they can disclose the record, not how they can keep from how they can withhold it. Excuse me. I misordered my notes here, so I butchered that a little bit. That said, with that little bit of background of the Public Records Act, I heard on the radio that a correctional officer, Gustavo Ramirez Meza Jr., was charged and convicted for introducing drugs into the Washington State Penitentiary. So what I did is I used the Public Records Act and I submitted the public records request to 3 different agencies: the Walla Walla Prosecutor's Office, the Walla Walla Police Department, and the Department of Corrections. And I essentially requested any and all reports, writings related to any and every investigation of C.O. Meza for introducing drugs and or contraband into the Washington State Penitentiary. In response, the Walla Walla Prosecutor's Office provided me several DVDs containing hundreds of pages of requested records. The Walla Walla Police Department provided essentially 428 pages, 308 pages of which specifically pertain to the Washington State Penitentiary's investigation of C.O. Meza for introducing drugs into the prison. Now, DOC provided me 77 pages of a workplace investigation of C.O. Meza for, 1, being arrested and booked into the Walla Walla County Jail on a charge of possession of controlled substance and introduction of contraband. 2, using a third party to impersonate himself and call into the prison and take sick leave after claiming to be sick while he was actually in jail. And 3, failing to report his arrest and incarceration to DOC's appointing authority prior to his scheduled work shift. Now, none of these 77 pages that DOC provided to me consisted or related to the 308 pages provided by the Walla Walla Police Department. So, I sued DOC under the Public Records Act and alleged, among other things, that prisoner James Freiberg, let me back up, if I may. Let me order my notes here, I got them all. So, after reviewing the reports that was provided by the Walla Walla Police Department, I discovered a couple tidbits that made me very concerned that the Department of Corrections was actually refusing to disclose or produce the records related to the investigation of C.O. Meza for introducing these drugs into the prison. One of the first points that I discovered was that K-9 Officer Seagraves was conducting an outside search of the Washington State Penitentiary staff parking lot on September 8, 2017, when his K-9, Galen, had a change of behavior on C.O. Gustavo Meza's van. On September 15th, a few days later, Canine Officer Ben Oleg, another canine officer, was conducting a different outside vehicle search of WSP's staff parking lot. And on September 15th, 2017, his K9 Roxy had a change of behavior on CO Mesa's van. K9 Roxy was a Washington State and Washington State Police Canine Association certified narcotic detection canine trained to find cocaine, crack, heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana, and spice, a synthetic cannabis. So, as far as I can tell in reviewing these reports that were provided by the Walla Walla Police Department, the only thing that was done about 2 different canine officers and 2 different canines hitting on this correctional officer's van in the staff parking lot was it was reported to Washington State Penitentiary's chief investigator, Credence Wendell, and nothing else, to my knowledge, was done about it. Now, in reviewing the report provided by WSP investigator Scott Garner on December 21st, 2018, I also learned that Mr. Garner noted that in May and June of 2018, the Washington State Penitentiary experienced a number of overdoses that resulted in at least 1 death. Mr. Garner's report went on to note that although they hadn't validated this belief, they did believe, based on the intelligence that they had gathered, that it is more likely than not that Lucio Ramirez Meza was responsible for supplying the drugs that caused the overdose and death of prisoner James Freiberg. So that troubled me. So I went ahead and filed a lawsuit against the Department of Corrections for violating the Public Records Act. In my lawsuit, which is currently active and in the Thurston County Superior Court, I alleged, among other things, that prisoner James Freiberg was confined at the Washington State Penitentiary when CO Meza was introducing drugs into the secure perimeter of the prison. That CO Meza was responsible for supplying the drugs that caused the overdose and death of prisoner Freiberg, and that DOC intentionally refused to disclose and produce hundreds of pages of records related to the investigation of CO Meza for introducing drugs into the prison, and did so in order to limit the publicity of information tending to inculpate the Department of Corrections in the death of prisoner Freiberg. So, after filing this suit, the Attorney General's office, by and through Assistant Attorney General Christopher Anderson, noted an appearance and basically put me on notice that he would be representing the Department of Corrections in this case. So, since then, I have had the Attorney General's office drag their feet with respect to turning over evidence to establish my claims. But what they've done, in addition to that, which is very interesting, is that this top law enforcement agency within the state of Washington has set out to launch an offensive, what I consider to be an offensive attack on me, to smear me as an inmate that is using the Public Records Act for personal profit, which seems to be a tactic and strategy that the Department of Corrections and the Attorney General's office is using to prevent prisoners from effectively using the Public Records Act to obtain evidence and records that we're entitled to. And so right now I have 3 different Assistant Attorney Generals in 3 different Public Records Act lawsuits. That is Christopher Anderson, Assistant Attorney General, Timothy Follner, Assistant Attorney General, and Kathy Van Rugen, Assistant Attorney General, all seeking to depose me. That is, put me under oath and subject me to an oral examination in each of the cases when my testimony in the cases has nothing whatsoever to do with the issues in dispute in each of these lawsuits. But in my view, it's an intimidation and a harassment tactic to dissuade me from litigating these cases in general. This case where DOC has suppressed hundreds of pages of records concerning its officers' involvement in the death of an inmate in particular. And the more, in my view, the more publicity we can get on this activity by the Office of the Attorney General and DOC, the better. Do you have any comments about that?
No, it looks like you are definitely on the right track here. You're using the available resources and you're fighting a system that is trying to suppress people, and that's exactly what we're looking for out here. Now, by using this body cam and this, reminding them of the public records, what do you hope to accomplish in your short-term goal?
With the body cameras or obtaining the records?
Both of them. Let's start with the body cameras. What do you hope to accomplish with that?
Well, I hope to accomplish, first and foremost, a mechanism whereby prisoners that are confined in these warehouses, that they can have a measure of protection against corruption and abuse at the hands of the guards. The body camera serves numerous purposes for the public, for the guards, for the prisoners, but my main objective as a prisoner who's been incarcerated for 27 continuous years now, and in the interest of full disclosure, I'm in prison for crimes I committed whenever I was 21 years old, bank robbery, and I shot it out with the police when they tried to arrest me after a bank robbery. So,
you have 60 seconds remaining.
Fans, I would like to just say that I'm not the same prisoner that I was back then, or person that I was back then. But back to the question, should I call you back?
Yes.
Okay. To pick back up on your question, is that body cameras will protect prisoners, myself and others. A prisoner's word against staff is never credible, especially when the staff is being accused of misconduct. Only if the administration wants to get rid of the staff member will the inmate's allegations be deemed credible. Or when the administration is using the testimony of an inmate against another inmate, will the inmate's testimony be considered credible? Excuse me. Body cameras, there's no drawbacks to them. like this where human beings are taken out of our communities, rightly or wrongly, and put in these warehouses, and a situation where custody staff are empowered to do whatever they want without very little accountability to the public. And when you have administrations that are concerned about protecting friendships and relationships with their staff instead of holding them accountable. That said, I want the records because I'm accumulating evidence of serious staff misconduct. Now, fortunate for anybody who believes in the rule of law, we have somebody on the Public Safety Committee in the legislature right now named Tara Simmons, or Tara Simmons, however you pronounce her name. She's a former inmate, was in the Washington Correction Center for Women at Purdy, and she was there due to, as I understand it, crimes related to drugs. But she changed her life. She became an attorney. She fought the Bar Association and to take the exam. She won. She has many people that support her, and she became an attorney, a criminal defense attorney. Now, then she ran for representative of her district and won, and now she's a House of Representatives member on the Public Safety Committee and other committees. It is my intent to to increase my support in the community, resources, human and otherwise, and marshal this evidence and present it in a report to this committee to support a bill requiring Department of Corrections to implement a body camera policy, to take it out of the hands of the Department of Corrections so when an incident occurs, they can't suppress the video footage. They can't not record. It has to be done per statute, and a copy of it needs to be in some sort of independent, whether it's the Ombuds or some other agency, to where Department of Corrections can't manipulate it, destroy it, suppress it, throw it away. So the more evidence of staff misconduct I can gather under the Public Records Act, the better in terms of my overall objective. And it's absolutely needed. I mean, before I turn it over to you, you can ask whatever questions you might have, Beth. I just want to touch on a couple more points in terms of the introduction of drugs into the prison. On July 20th, a 20-year employee of the Department of Corrections and Airway Heights Correction Center officer, Michael Matter, was arrested for introducing meth, heroin, and Suboxone into the prison. He was charged in federal court with possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver, and the federal agent that brought the charges against him filed a 63-page complaint detailing a web of corruption and conspiracy to introduce drugs into the Airway Heights Correction Center. Now, it's obvious of what that does when you have a law enforcement that's coming into a controlled community like a prison, where the criminogenic factor is at its highest, and introducing controlled substances like meth and heroin into the prison system. It causes assaults, overdoses, deaths, like in the case of Mr. Freiberg. It's just negative. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that this officer, he got 2 months in federal prison, an exceptional sentence downward from the guideline. And the federal judge, Rosanna Peterson, sealed the sentencing memorandum. so that the public cannot review or scrutinize the basis for the 2-month sentence, whereas the inmate allegedly involved with Mr. Matter, CO Matter, he received 56 months. And the female in the community that was prosecuted for the same conspiracy charges received 30 months in prison. And their sentences weren't sealed, but the law enforcement officers was. And so we don't get a look at why the judge gave him 2 months after bringing all this drugs in and spreading it within the prison system among the inmate population. And another sad fact is that, and as the various, or at least one newspaper article that I read on this topic, is that DOC policy does not even disqualify either CO Matter or Correctional Officer Meza at the prison from, again, being reemployed by the Department of Corrections. Their convictions, felony convictions, do not prohibit them from working here again. And so that's something that needs to be brought to light. Another thing needs to be brought to light. In both instances, CO Meza, the one that brought the drugs in, and according to Mr. Garner's report, caused the death of prisoner Freiberg, he was allowed to resign. Mr. Matter, one who brought the drugs into the Airway Heights Correction Center, when that conspiracy of corruption and introduction of controlled substances into the prison, he was allowed to resign. So there's another tidbit that the Public Records Act has unearthed and is available for public consumption because of my activity and others. Now, but in contrast, what we have on August 2019, a prisoner, Derek Barton, overdosed and died in Grant County Jail after Correctional Officer Jordan Tebow smuggled drugs into the jail. Another prisoner death because of drugs being brought in by correctional staff, law enforcement officers. So, but in contrast to what the Department of Corrections has done and is doing, is the Grant County Prosecutor's Office, according to the little piece of information I read in the Prison Legal News, charged Correctional Officer Tebow with homicide for bringing drugs into the jail and supplying them to an inmate, and that inmate overdosing and dying. He faced homicide charges, and according to the same article, he received 10 years in prison. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The guards are continuously bringing cell phones, giving the gang members drugs into the prison. And people are suffering because of it. But if the Department of Corrections had a body camera policy, the public, the taxpayer, wouldn't have to pay these thousands of dollars for each investigation when the department decides to investigate. You know, they'll be able to discover it much quicker when the staff conduct is being continuously recorded. So, that's some food for thought for the people out there.
Okay, now you mentioned that there was an occurrence inside of a cell, and there's no surveillance of the cell. Now, these guards are pretty clever. Do you suppose that there'll be any incidences where they'll move somebody into a cell and avoid using the body cam, or do you want the body cam to be used actively inside the cell as well?
Well, the body cameras, according to the policy that I want, it has to be, and mainly should be used in the cell. Now, will there be incidents where guards turn them off? Where absolutely, just like there those kinds of incidents in the community. You know, the unfortunate fact is that some of the individuals that are employed by the Department of Corrections or the police forces in our communities are no better than the individuals that are incarcerated that still subscribe to their criminal codes and lifestyles. So, man, as a person that has the faculty of volition, always has choices to make. So, yeah, they'll be turned off at times. We'll deal with that. But that doesn't mean that we should junk the policy.
Now, do you want all body cam coverage to be available to the public records?
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%.
Now, is anybody concerned about privacy on something like this?
Well, the privacy doesn't apply because we're in a public space. Prisoners have no right to privacy that would interfere or be a legitimate reason to bar the video or body camera policies. We're housed in a state prison, county jails, well, particularly state prisons, in a public environment. And so if somebody wants to get a video camcorder and record you as you're walking down the sidewalk in the city, they can do that because you're in the public domain. So obviously there's a guard wearing a body camera can't come in your cell and watch you use the toilet or watch you in the shower. Those things could be, if that happens, they could be corrected through litigation and that sort of process.
Yeah, I've known a few times that I've requested public records that I've received the records with a redaction in it. And I'm sure there's incidences where there's a fight that breaks out in the shower, or somebody's checking in, doing a welfare check or something on a cell, and they'll run across a personal and private moment. And so I just don't want them to use body cams, as a tool to propaganda or something like that. Because the public, they're not always trusted as well.
I think that's a legitimate concern, but the Public Records Act has a built-in check for that, and they have an exemption for privacy. So let's take your hypothetical as an example. If somebody falls out in the shower and custody staff respond in an emergency situation and their camcorder's recording, and say, for example, I'm laying on the shower floor naked and I'm being recorded, and then somebody requests that, then the Department of Corrections can redact portions of that body camera footage under the privacy exemption. Now, because there's no public interest in anybody seeing me laying naked on the shower floor. Now, if that in fact becomes an issue in which seeing that footage is an issue, say that it shows a knife in my back or something that's relevant to a dispute, then in a lawsuit, DOC could be forced to turn over that footage, and it could be protected by certain orders where the lawyer that gets it cannot publicize it, disclose it, etc. Protective orders. So there's mechanisms to protect people from these security concerns or privacy concerns that you bring up.
Okay, now something like that will definitely have to either create new laws and legislation or modify some of the current ones. So what kind of support do you have for the body cams in our Congress?
Well, I have zero support right now. I'm a one-man show. I need support. That's why in my position that I'm on the phone with you right now, I would like this interview to generate support and an interest in this body camera lawsuit. I'm just one prisoner, and while most prisoners sit in here and they play cards and dominoes and, do those sort of things, I'm focused on change, positive change within myself as well as my environment. And this is something, after being in here 27 years, I passionately believe in, and it's needed, and I'm working toward that end. But as far as any support within the Congress, I have none at this point, but I can also say that I haven't reached a point to where I presented my arguments and my evidence to anybody yet either. I'm still in the stage of collecting, and I'm having to battle the Department of Corrections and the Office of the Attorney General's office to even get that. So hopefully this interview will generate support. People will want to help in whatever way they can. And the one-man show can be a collective effort.
All right, and so do you mind if people contact you through JPay or write a letter?
I would love that.
Okay, we'll go ahead and post that at the end of this interview. And my final question to you, is there anything else you'd like the public to know before we go?
The last thing in closing, I would like to just say that when it comes to public service and changing things, it only takes one or two people, like your willingness to give me this airtime.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Like much to you or the next person, but it's extremely valuable service. And thank you for that. And thank you for anybody that wants to help us do the same thing.
Okay, this concludes our interview. And as you can see, the telephone calls are roughly 20 minutes. And so he had quite a bit to say. And this is all about the folks who are locked up and their loved ones. And so to give him an opportunity to speak his mind and to express his mission to the world, that's what I want to do. And this is a very determined individual, and any support that you can throw his way would be greatly appreciated. Hopefully we can get something like this across the entire United States and get some kind of improvement going on out there, because that's what it's all about, improving the system. So at the end of this video, you'll have his contact information, and feel free to go ahead and drop him a line, write him a letter, and let him know what you can do for him. Or if you're not happy with what he's doing, maybe he can make some changes, or maybe you can just get that word out so that he'll know what people feel like out here. Thank you for tuning in, and you have yourself a wonderful day.